The cafeteria at Lincoln High School was packed that Tuesday afternoon. Students filled every table, their voices creating that familiar lunchtime chaos that echoed off the walls. Near the back corner, 17-year-old Jake Patterson sat with his usual group of friends, halfway through his sandwich when he noticed something that made him stop chewing. A younger kid, maybe 14 or 15, was walking carefully through the crowd with his lunch tray. Jake had seen him around before. The boy had dark curly hair and always seemed to keep his head down when he walked through the hallways. What Jake noticed most was that the kid had a stutter. Not a small one either. It took him a while to get his words out, and Jake had seen other students smirk or look away impatiently when he tried to speak. Today, that kid was about to sit down at an empty spot when 3 older students blocked his path. Jake recognized them immediately. They were the type who always seemed to be looking for someone to mess with. The tallest one, a guy named Brandon who played on the football team, stepped right in front of the younger student. "Hey," stammering Stephen. Brandon mocked, imitating the way the boy spoke. His 2 friends laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. The boy, whose name was actually Danny, looked down at his tray. His face had turned red. Jake could see his hands starting to shake slightly. "I just want to sit down," Danny managed to say. "Oh, he talks," one of Brandon's friends said loudly, making sure other students could hear. "Say something else, come on. Give us a show." Jake felt something tighten in his chest. Around them, other students were watching now, but nobody was doing anything. Some were even pulling out their phones. This was going to end up on social media, Jake realized. This kid was about to be humiliated in front of the whole school, and it would follow him forever online. Brandon suddenly knocked the tray upward, and everything went flying. Chocolate milk splashed across Danny's shirt. His sandwich hit the floor. The apple rolled under a nearby table. The plastic tray clattered loudly on the tile floor, and the entire cafeteria seemed to go quiet for just a moment before Brandon's friends started laughing again. Danny stood there frozen, milk dripping down his shirt, his eyes getting watery. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. That's when Jake stood up. He didn't really think about it. He just moved. "Hey," Jake called out, walking toward them. His heart was pounding, but he kept walking. "Leave him alone." Brandon turned around, surprised. "What's your problem, Patterson? Mind your business." "This is my business," Jake said, stopping right next to Danny. He could feel everyone's eyes on him now. "You done acting tough? Because picking on freshmen isn't exactly impressive." Brandon's face darkened. "You want to be next?" "I want you to back off and let him be," Jake said, his voice steady even though his palms were sweating. He was tall, almost as tall as Brandon, but this wasn't really about size. This was about whether he was going to walk away or stand his ground. For a long moment, nobody moved. The cafeteria had gone almost completely silent now. Even the lunch ladies had stopped what they were doing to watch. Brandon stepped closer to Jake. "You think you're some kind of hero?" "I think you're some kind of coward," Jake replied quietly. 3 against 1? Real brave. Brandon's friends shifted uncomfortably. Some of the other students were still filming, but the mood had changed. A few kids at nearby tables were nodding. One girl said, "He's right, just leave the kid alone." Brandon looked around and seemed to realize that this wasn't going the way he'd planned. "Whatever," he finally said. "This is stupid." He looked at Jake with real anger in his eyes. "You're going to regret this, Patterson. Watch your back." He shoved past Jake, his shoulder hitting him hard, and his friends followed. They grabbed their stuff and left the cafeteria, still trying to act like they didn't care. Jake immediately turned to Danny, who was still standing there in shock. "Hey, you okay?" Danny nodded, but tears were running down his face now. He was trying to wipe them away quickly, embarrassed. "Come on," Jake said gently. "Let's get you cleaned up." He bent down and picked up Danny's tray and the stuff that had fallen. The sandwich was ruined, but he grabbed the apple and handed it to Danny. As they walked toward the exit, Jake noticed something that made him feel a little better. A few students actually started clapping. Not everyone, but enough. A girl from Jake's math class gave him a thumbs up. His friend Carlos called out, "That's what I'm talking about." Jake walked Danny to the nurse's office. The whole way there, Danny didn't say much. When they arrived, Jake explained what happened to the nurse, who immediately got Danny a clean shirt from the lost and found and some paper towels. "Thank you," Danny finally managed to say to Jake. The stutter was still there, but his eyes were grateful. And nobody's ever— It's okay, Jake said. Those guys are jerks. Don't let them get to you. They did do this all the time, Danny admitted quietly. And not just to me. To lots of K-kids. That information hit Jake hard. This wasn't just a one-time thing. This was happening regularly and nobody was stopping it. The nurse stepped out to make a phone call, probably to the principal's office. Jake pulled out his phone and handed it to Danny. Put your number in here. If those guys bother you again, text me, okay? Danny looked surprised but took the phone and typed in his number. As Jake walked back toward the cafeteria, his mind was racing. He thought about his own experience in middle school when he'd been the new kid, and some 8th graders had made his life miserable for months. He remembered how alone he'd felt, how he dreaded going to school every single day. Back then, nobody had stood up for him. He just had to endure it until they got bored and moved on to someone else. That evening, Jake couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. He kept seeing Danny's face, the humiliation and hurt in his eyes. He thought about what Danny had said about it happening all the time to lots of kids. Finally, Jake opened his Instagram. His hands hovered over the keyboard for a moment. Then he started typing. He didn't use Danny's name, but he described what he'd witnessed. He talked about how bullying had become so normalized at their school that students would literally film it for entertainment. He talked about how the adults rarely seemed to know what was really happening, and when they did, nothing much changed. He ended with a simple question. When did we all become okay with this? Jake hit post and put his phone down. He had no idea that by morning everything would change. Jake woke up the next morning to his phone buzzing nonstop. Still half asleep, he grabbed it from his nightstand and squinted at the screen. 37 notifications. Then 42. Then 51. They just kept coming. He sat up in bed and opened Instagram. His post from last night had completely blown up. When he'd gone to sleep, it had maybe 20 likes and a few supportive comments from his friends. Now it had been shared over 3,000 times. The comment section had exploded with hundreds of responses, and they were still coming in every few seconds. Jake started scrolling through them, his heart beating faster as he read. This happened to my son last year and the school did nothing. Finally, someone speaking up about this. Lincoln High has a serious problem. My daughter came home crying 3 times last week because of bullying. Thank you for standing up. I graduated from Lincoln 5 years ago and it was bad then too. Nothing ever changes. But not all the comments were supportive. Some made Jake's stomach turn. You're just trying to get attention. Those boys were probably just joking around. Kids these days are too sensitive. This is just normal high school stuff. My son was there and said you made it seem way worse than it actually was. Jake noticed that last comment was from an account belonging to Brandon's, mother. Great. His phone rang, making him jump. It was a number he didn't recognize, but it had his area code. He answered cautiously. Hello? Is this Jake Patterson? A woman's voice asked. She sounded like she'd been crying. Yes, this is Jake. This is Patricia Martinez. I'm Danny's mother. Her voice cracked. I just wanted to call and thank you for what you did yesterday. Danny told me everything last night and then I saw your post this morning. I've been trying to get the school to do something about the bullying for months, but they keep telling me they're handling it internally. Jake didn't know what to say. I'm sorry that's been happening to him. He seems like a really good kid. He is, she said. And Jake could hear her crying now. He used to love school. Now he begs me to let him stay home. He's scared every single day. And yesterday when you stood up for him, he came home and smiled for the first time in weeks. So thank you. Thank you so much. After they hung up, Jake felt even more overwhelmed. His mom knocked on his door. Jake? Principal Crawford's office just called. They want to see you and your father this morning before school starts. Jake's dad drove him to school an hour early. Neither of them said much during the ride. His father had seen the post too, and all he'd said was, "You did the right thing standing up for that kid. But this might get complicated." Principal Crawford was waiting in her office with her arms crossed. She was a thin woman in her 50s with glasses that she kept adjusting when she was annoyed. Right now, she was very annoyed. "Mr. Patterson, Jake, please sit down," she said in that overly calm voice adults use when they're actually angry. They sat. Jake's dad put a hand on Jake's shoulder. "Jake, your social media post has created a significant problem for this school," Principal Crawford began. "We've been receiving calls from parents all morning. The district superintendent has been contacted. The local news has even reached out. I just described what happened, Jake said. You described your perception of what happened, she corrected him. And in doing so, you've made Lincoln High look like we tolerate bullying, which is simply not true. We have policies in place. We handle these situations, and do you? Jake's dad spoke up. Because from what I'm reading online, a lot of parents don't think so. Principal Crawford's jaw tightened. Mr. Patterson, I've been principal here for 12 years. I know how to run a school. What I don't need is a teenager stirring up drama on social media and making parents panic unnecessarily. It's not drama if it's true, Jake said quietly. Jake, Principal Crawford leaned forward. I'm asking you respectfully to delete that post. You've made your point, but leaving it up is only making things worse. Brandon's parents have already contacted their lawyer about potential defamation. Defamation? Jake's dad stood up. He's describing what he witnessed. That's not defamation, that's truth. That's one perspective, Principal Crawford replied coolly. And if this continues to escalate, we may have to consider disciplinary action for Jake for creating a hostile environment and violating our social media code of conduct. Jake felt his face get hot. I'm the one who might get in trouble. I stopped someone from being bullied. You inserted yourself into a situation that teachers would have handled, and then you aired school business publicly without permission. That has consequences. Jake's dad put his hand on Jake's shoulder again. Come on, son. We're leaving. Mr. Patterson, we're not finished. Yes, we are, Jake's dad said firmly. You want to threaten my kid with discipline for speaking up about bullying, while protecting the kids who did the bullying? That post stays up. And if you try to punish Jake for this, you better believe every parent who commented on that post will hear about it. They walked out. Jake felt shaky but also weirdly proud of his dad. In the hallway, students were already arriving. Several of them recognized Jake and gave him fist bumps or pats on the back. A girl from his history class stopped him. Hey, Jake, what you wrote last night? That was really brave. My little brother is in 8th grade and some kids have been messing with him all year. I showed your post to my mom and she's finally going to call the school about it. By lunchtime, the post had been shared over 10,000 times. Jake found Danny sitting alone at a table in the corner and he went to join him. You okay? Jake asked. Danny nodded. My mom told me she'd talk to you this morning. She's really happy you're standing up about this. Yeah, well, the principal isn't, Jake said, biting into his sandwich. She threatened to discipline me if I don't take the post down. Are you going to? Jake looked at Danny, remembering the look on his face yesterday when his lunch tray went flying. No way. That night, Jake's post was picked up by a local parenting group on Facebook. A mom named Angela Reynolds, whose teenage son had attempted to harm himself the previous year, after months of being bullied at Lincoln High, read Jake's post and started crying. She'd been silent about her family's experience because they'd moved her son to a different school, and she wanted to move on. But seeing Jake's words, seeing how many other families were suffering, something broke open inside her. Angela opened her laptop and created an event page. She titled it, Stand Against Bullying, Lincoln High Rally. In the description, she wrote about her son's experience and called for every concerned parent to show up at the school the next morning to demand real change. She set the time for 7:30 a.m. and hit publish. Within an hour, 50 parents had clicked attending. By midnight, that number had grown to over 200. The post was being shared across every parent group in the district. People were tagging the school board members. Someone had created a petition demanding policy changes. Jake had no idea any of this was happening. He'd turned off his phone notifications because they wouldn't stop buzzing. He fell asleep thinking the worst was over. He had no idea that when he arrived at school the next morning, everything would be different. At 11:30 that night, Principal Crawford was still in her office. The desk lamp cast shadows across stacks of papers she'd been too stressed to look at. Her computer screen glowed with dozens of unread emails, most of them from angry parents. Her phone had been ringing all evening until she'd finally turned the ringer off. She rubbed her temples and opened Facebook on her computer, something she rarely did. The school's official page had been tagged in hundreds of posts. Parents were demanding meetings. Former students were sharing their own bullying stories from years ago. Someone had even started a hashtag, "Well, Lincoln High must do better." Then she saw it. The event page, Stand Against Bullying, Lincoln High Rally. Her blood ran cold as she read the description and scrolled through the attendee list. 217 confirmed. Tomorrow morning, 7:30 a.m. Right before school started, she immediately called the superintendent, Frank Morrison, even though it was late. He answered on the third ring, his voice groggy. "Helen, what's wrong?" "We have a situation," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "A big one." She explained everything. The original incident, Jake's post, the viral spread, and now this rally. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Morrison said, "Can you cancel school tomorrow?" "On what grounds?" "We can't just cancel school because parents want to protest. This is going to be a media circus, Helen, I know that." She immediately regretted snapping. "I'm sorry. I don't know how this got so out of control so fast." "What do you want to do?" Crawford thought for a moment. "If we cancel school, it looks like we're running scared. If we tell parents they can't show up, we look like we're trying to silence them. I think we have to let it happen and deal with it. The board is not going to be happy about this. The board hasn't been paying attention to this issue for years," Crawford said quietly. "Maybe they should have been." After she hung up, Crawford sat alone in her dark office for a long time. She thought about her 12 years as principal. She'd always believed she ran a good school. Test scores were decent. Sports teams won championships. Most kids graduated and went to college. But sitting there, reading post after post from parents whose children had been suffering, she had to wonder if she'd been missing something big all along. While Crawford sat in her office, across town Angela Reynolds couldn't sleep either. She kept refreshing the event page on her phone, watching the number of attendees climb. Each new name felt like validation. She wasn't alone in this. Other families had been hurt too. Her husband, Tom, rolled over in bed. "You should try to sleep." "I can't," Angela whispered. "What if nobody shows up tomorrow? What if I organize this whole thing and I'm just standing there alone looking stupid?" "Over 200 people have confirmed, Ang. People confirm Facebook events all the time and don't show up." Tom reached over and took her hand. "Even if only 10 people show up, that's 10 people standing with you. That's 10 families saying enough is enough." In another part of town, Brandon's parents were having a very different conversation. His father, Richard, was pacing their living room while his mother, Michelle, sat on the couch with her arms crossed. "This is ridiculous," Richard was saying. "Our son is being made into a villain over some harmless teasing. Boys have been doing this stuff since the beginning of time. It's how they establish social order." "Did you read what that Patterson kid wrote?" Michelle asked. "He made Brandon sound like some kind of monster." "That's exactly why we need to sue for defamation. These people can't just go online and destroy a kid's reputation." Michelle nodded. "I already talked to David Brennan. He said we have a case." What neither of them were discussing was the conversation they'd had with Brandon earlier that evening. When confronted about the incident, he'd been defensive at first. But when his mother pushed harder, asking him to tell the truth about what really happened, he'd finally admitted that maybe they'd been messing with Danny a few times before. Maybe more than a few times. And maybe it wasn't just Danny. His parents had chosen not to hear that part. It was easier to blame Jake for exaggerating than to face what their son had been doing. Meanwhile, Danny couldn't believe what his mother was showing him on her phone. "All these people are coming to school tomorrow because of what happened to me?" Patricia nodded, tears in her eyes. "Because of what happened to you and so many other kids, sweetie. People are finally paying attention." "I don't want everyone looking at me," Danny said nervously. "I know, but sometimes being brave means letting people see what hurt you. You didn't do anything wrong. Those boys did. And tomorrow we're going to make sure the school knows that this has to stop." Danny thought about Jake, who'd stood up for him when nobody else would. If Jake could be brave in the cafeteria in front of everyone, maybe Danny could be brave tomorrow too. By midnight, the event page had 241 confirmed attendees. Local news stations had gotten wind of the rally and were planning to send reporters. Someone had contacted the district school board members, and several were now planning to attend. The story had even been picked up by a regional news website. Jake finally checked his phone before bed and saw hundreds of new notifications. But the one that stood out was a text from Danny. "Thank you for everything. Tomorrow is going to be intense. I'm glad you'll be there." Jake texted back, "We got this. See you tomorrow." But as he lay in bed trying to fall asleep, Jake felt nervous. This had all started with him just trying to help one kid. Now it had turned into something much bigger. Parents were rallying. The news was involved. What if it all went wrong somehow? What if he'd made everything worse? His dad knocked softly and opened the door. "You awake?" "Yeah." His dad sat on the edge of the bed. "I know this feels big and scary right now. But you did something important, Jake. You saw someone being hurt and you didn't look away. A lot of people spend their whole lives looking away. You didn't. I just don't want anyone to get hurt because of this. The people who got hurt were already being hurt. You just made it visible. There's a difference." After his dad left, Jake finally drifted off to sleep. His alarm was set for 6:30. He wanted to get to school early, though he had no idea what he was walking into. None of them did. At 7:15 the next morning, the first cars started arriving at Lincoln High School. Then more cars, then more. Parents began gathering in the parking lot, many holding homemade signs. By 7:25, the line of cars stretched down the block. News vans pulled up, reporters checking their cameras and microphones. Inside the school, Principal Crawford stood at her office window and watched the parking lot fill with people. Her secretary knocked on the door. "Ma'am, they're here. A lot of them." Crawford took a deep breath. "I can see that. Call the board president. Tell him he needs to get here now." She straightened her blazer and headed toward the front doors. Whatever was about to happen, she had to face it. Jake's dad drove slowly into the Lincoln High parking lot at 7:30 and stopped the car. They both just stared. The entire front walkway was lined with parents, easily over 100 of them. They held signs that read, "Protect our children," "Stop bullying now," "We stand with our kids," and "Enough is enough." Some parents had brought their younger children, who held signs too. A cluster of news cameras was set up near the entrance, reporters speaking into microphones as they filmed the growing crowd. "Wow," Jake's dad said quietly. "I didn't expect this many people." Jake felt his stomach flip. This had all started because he stood up for Danny in the cafeteria. Now it had turned into something he could barely recognize. As they got out of the car, a reporter noticed Jake. She hurried over with her cameraman following. "Are you Jake Patterson?" she asked. Yes. "I'm Kelly Zhang from Channel 7 News. Could we ask you a few questions about what happened and why you decided to post about it?" Jake's dad stepped between them. "My son isn't giving interviews right now." "Thank you." They walked toward the entrance, and as they did, several parents noticed Jake. A woman with curly red hair approached them. "You're Jake, aren't you?" "I'm Lisa Chen. My daughter is in your grade. I just wanted to say thank you for speaking up. My daughter has been bullied here for 2 years, and I had no idea how bad it was until I read your post." "I'm sorry that happened to her," Jake managed to say. "Don't be sorry. Be proud. You started something important today." More students were arriving now, and they all stopped and stared at the scene. Some pulled out their phones and started filming. Jake saw some of his friends and gave them an awkward wave. This was so surreal. Then he saw Danny and his mother walking up the path. Patricia Martinez had her arm around Danny's shoulders. When she spotted Jake, her eyes filled with tears. She walked right up to him and hugged him without saying a word. "Thank you," she finally whispered. "Thank you for caring about my son." Danny looked embarrassed but grateful. "This is crazy," he said to Jake. "Yeah," Jake agreed. "I had no idea this would happen." At that moment, the front doors of the school opened and Principal Crawford stepped out. The crowd grew quiet. She walked to the top of the entrance steps where everyone could see her. Her face was pale but composed. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying across the parking lot. "I understand many of you are here because you have concerns about bullying at Lincoln High. I want you to know that we take these concerns seriously." "Then why haven't you done anything about it?" A father shouted from the crowd. Crawford's jaw tightened. "We have policies in place to address bullying. Any incident that's reported is investigated and handled appropriately. My son reported being bullied 6 times last semester," a mother called out. Nothing changed. The same kids kept doing it. Other parents began speaking up, their voices overlapping. "My daughter was afraid to come to school. The teachers see it happening and do nothing. You suspended my son for fighting back, but the kids who started it got nothing." Crawford held up her hands. "I understand you're frustrated. I would like to invite a delegation of parents inside to discuss these issues in detail." "We don't want a closed-door meeting." Angela Reynolds stepped forward. She was holding a clipboard. We want real change. We have a list of specific demands and we want to know when they'll be implemented. Crawford looked uncomfortable. I'm not authorized to make policy changes on the spot. That requires board approval. Then we'll wait for the board to get here, Angela said firmly. A man in a suit approached from the parking lot. Jake recognized him from photos in the school hallway. It was Frank Morrison, the superintendent. He climbed the steps and spoke quietly with Crawford for a moment. Then he turned to address the crowd. I'm Superintendent Morrison. I want to assure all of you that the district is committed to providing a safe learning environment for every student. We will hold an emergency board meeting this evening to address your concerns. All parents are welcome to attend and speak. That's not good enough, Angela said. How many more kids have to suffer while you schedule meetings? The crowd murmured in agreement. A few parents started chanting, "No more waiting! No more waiting!" Inside the school, students pressed against the windows watching everything unfold. Word had spread quickly through social media about what was happening outside. By now, every student in the building knew about the rally. Brandon stood in the main hallway with his friends, watching through the window. He felt sick to his stomach. Some students nearby were talking. This is all because Brandon and his friends wouldn't. Leave that freshman alone, a girl said. I heard Brandon might get expelled, another student added. Brandon's face burned. His friends had scattered, not wanting to be associated with him. He'd never meant for any of this to happen. It was just messing around. That's what he'd told himself. But standing there, watching over 100 parents demand change because of what he'd done, he couldn't pretend anymore that it was no big deal. Back outside, Morrison was trying to regain control of the situation. I propose we bring in 10 parent representatives to meet with Principal Crawford, myself, and the board president when he arrives. We'll review your concerns and provide concrete responses. Angela looked at the other parents. Several nodded. Fine, she said. But this meeting happens now and we want commitments, not promises to look into things. Crawford led Angela and 9 other parents inside to the conference room. The rest of the parents remained outside, their presence a constant reminder that they weren't going away. Inside the conference room, Angela placed her clipboard on the table. We have 5 demands. First, mandatory anti-bullying training for all staff and students. Second, a zero-tolerance policy with clear public consequences for bullying behavior. Third, an anonymous reporting system that students actually trust. Fourth, hire additional counselors because 2 counselors for 1,500 students isn't enough. Fifth, regular surveys to assess the school climate so you actually know what's happening. Morrison and Crawford exchanged glances. These weren't unreasonable demands. They were things the school probably should have implemented years ago. These changes require funding, Morrison said carefully. The counselor positions alone would need board approval and budget allocation. Then get it approved, another parent said sharply. Figure it out, because if you don't, we'll be back here every single day until you do. While the meeting continued inside, Jake sat on a bench outside with Danny. News crews were still filming. More students had arrived and were standing in clusters talking about what was happening. A girl Jake recognized from his English class approached them. Hey, Jake. I just wanted to say I think what you did was really cool. I've seen people get bullied here and I never said anything. I always felt bad about that. You can start saying something now, Jake replied. She nodded. Yeah, I think I will. Throughout the morning, as classes were supposed to start, hardly anyone went inside. Students stayed in the parking lot talking with their parents, watching the protest. Teachers didn't know what to do. Some came outside to try to get students to class, but gave up quickly. This was bigger than attendance policies now. At 10 o'clock, Brandon's parents pulled up. They decided to come to support their son. But when they saw the massive gathering and the news cameras, they stayed in their car, unsure what to do. Richard called their lawyer from the parking lot. David, things have escalated. There are over 100 parents here and news crews. Should we still pursue the defamation case? There was a pause. Richard, I'm going to be honest with you. Given the public sentiment right now, a lawsuit would make you look like you're trying to silence people speaking up about bullying. It could backfire badly. Richard hung up and looked at his wife. For the first time, they both realized that maybe this wasn't about Jake exaggerating. Maybe this was about something they'd been refusing to see. The emergency school board meeting that evening was unlike anything Lincoln High had ever seen. The meeting room, which normally held maybe 50 people comfortably, was packed with over 300 parents, students, teachers, and community members. People lined the walls and spilled into the hallway. Local news cameras positioned themselves at the back of the room. Jake sat with his parents in the third row. Danny and his mother sat right behind them. Angela Reynolds and the other parent representatives sat in the front row, their clipboards and notes ready. The 7 school board members sat at a long table facing the crowd. They looked nervous. Board President Robert Chen called the meeting to order at 6 o'clock sharp. "We're here tonight to address concerns about bullying and school safety at Lincoln High School," he began. "We've reviewed the demands presented by parents this morning. Before we discuss those, I want to open the floor for public comment. Please keep remarks to 3 minutes." The first person to stand was Patricia Martinez. Her hands shook as she held the microphone, but her voice was strong. "My son Danny has been bullied at this school for 8 months. He has a stutter, and some students think that makes him an easy target. I reported it to his teachers. I reported it to the principal. Each time I was told they would handle it, but nothing changed. My son stopped eating lunch because he was afraid to go to the cafeteria. He developed anxiety that requires medication. He asked me if he could do online school instead. He's 14 years old and he's afraid to go to school. That should never happen. And based on what I've heard from other parents, my son is not alone. This school has failed our children. Tonight you have a chance to fix that. Please don't waste it." She sat down to applause. Jake saw tears running down Danny's face, but he was clapping for his mother. Next, Angela Reynolds stood up. 3 years ago, my son was bullied so severely at this school that he tried to take his own life. We moved him to another school to get him help and to heal. I stayed quiet about what happened because I wanted to move forward. But when I saw Jake Patterson's post, when I saw how many families are still suffering, I realized that staying quiet doesn't protect anyone. It just lets the problem continue. My son survived, thank God. But how many other families have to go through that kind of trauma before this school takes real action? The 5 demands we presented this morning are not negotiable. They're the bare minimum of what should already be in place. Several more parents spoke, each sharing their own stories. A father talked about his daughter who stopped participating in class because students mocked her appearance. A mother described how her son pretended to be sick almost every Monday because he dreaded the start of another week of harassment. A teacher even stood up and admitted that staff often felt powerless to stop bullying because there were no clear consequences that were actually enforced. After an hour of testimony, Board President Chen looked at his fellow board members. "I think we've heard enough to understand the severity of this situation. I'd like to propose that we vote tonight on implementing the 5 demands presented by the Parent Coalition." Board member Susan Park raised her hand. "These demands have budget implications. The additional counselors alone would cost approximately $200,000 annually. Where does that money come from?" "We find it," Chen said firmly. "We cut from other areas if we have to. This is about the safety of our students. Nothing is more important than that." Board member James Wright spoke up. "I want to add something to the proposal. I think Principal Crawford should step down. I don't say this to be cruel, but there's been a clear failure of leadership at Lincoln High. These problems didn't start this week. They've been building for years. We need someone in that position who will prioritize student well-being above test scores and sports championships." The room went silent. Principal Crawford sat in the front row, her face expressionless. After a long moment, she stood and approached the microphone. "I want to say something," she said quietly. Her voice cracked slightly. "Sitting here tonight listening to these parents describe what their children have endured, I feel ashamed. I genuinely believed I was running a good school. I focused on academics and achievement because that's what I thought mattered most. But I see now that I missed something crucial. I failed to create an environment where every student felt safe. And for that I am truly sorry." She paused, wiping her eyes. "Mr. Wright is right. These problems happened on my watch. I don't think stepping down should be part of a vote. I'm resigning effective immediately. This school needs leadership that will make student well-being the top priority from day one." The room erupted in murmurs. Chen banged his gavel. "We accept your resignation, Principal Crawford, and we thank you for your 12 years of service." The board voted unanimously to implement all 5 demands within 30 days. They also voted to bring in an outside consultant to do a comprehensive review of the school's culture and to establish a parent advisory committee that would meet monthly with school administration. But The biggest surprise came from board member Wright. "I have one more motion. I propose we establish the Jake Patterson Student Courage Award, given annually to a student who stands up against bullying or injustice." This young man did what adults should have been doing all along. We should honor that. Jake felt his face turn red as people turned to look at him. The motion passed with applause from the audience. After the meeting ended, reporters swarmed Jake, but his father helped him navigate through the crowd and out to their car. As they drove home, Jake's mom turned around from the front seat. "How are you feeling, honey?" Jake didn't know how to answer. "I just wanted to help Danny. I never thought all of this would happen." "You started something important," his dad said. "You should be proud." The next day at school felt different. The energy had shifted. During announcements, the interim principal addressed the entire school about the changes that would be implemented. Assemblies about bullying and respect would begin next week. The anonymous reporting system would be live by the end of the month. 2 new counselors would start within 60 days, but the real change was harder to define. Students who'd always looked the other way when someone was being picked on started speaking up. Teachers paid closer attention to interactions in the hallways and cafeteria. There was a new awareness, a sense that everyone was responsible for the school's culture. Brandon and his 2 friends were suspended for 2 weeks. When they returned, they would be required to complete 40 hours of community service at an anti-bullying nonprofit organization. Brandon's parents had finally sat down with him and had a long, difficult conversation about his behavior. It wasn't easy, and Brandon had gotten defensive at first, but eventually the reality of what he'd been doing had sunk in. 3 months later, the changes at Lincoln High were noticeable. The anonymous reporting system had logged 47 incidents, each one investigated and addressed. Students were actually using it because they saw that reports led to real action. The additional counselors meant students could actually get appointments when they needed support instead of waiting weeks. The Parent Advisory Committee met monthly and kept pressure on the administration to follow through on their commitments. Angela Reynolds chaired the committee, channeling her family's pain into making sure no other family had to go through what they did. But perhaps the most visible change was the friendship that had formed between Jake and Danny. They ate lunch together every day now. Danny had joined Jake's gaming club and discovered he was really good at strategy games. His confidence had grown so much that he'd even raised his hand in class a few times, stutter and all, and other students had listened respectfully. 6 months after the cafeteria incident, Danny did something no one expected. He volunteered to speak at a school assembly about his experience with bullying. Jake sat in the audience, nervous for his friend. Danny walked to the microphone on stage. The entire school sat watching. He took a deep breath. "My name is Danny Martinez," he began. His stutter was there, but his voice was strong. "Sir, 6 months ago, I was afraid to come to school. I was bullied almost every day because I had to talk differently than other people. I felt alone and scared and worthless." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "Then something happened. Someone stood up for me. He didn't have to. We weren't even friends. But he saw me being hurt and he decided that wasn't okay. That person was Jake P. Patterson." Students turned to look at Jake, who felt his face burning. Danny continued, "Jake's courage changed my life. But it did more than that. It changed this whole school. Because he spoke up, hundreds of parents spoke up. Because he cared, adults started paying attention. Because he refused to look away, all of you are learning not to look away either." Danny's confidence grew as he spoke. His stutter was still there, but nobody seemed to care. They were listening to his words. "I'm not going to stand here and say bullying is completely gone from Lincoln High. That would be a lie. But it's better. A lot better. And that happened because one person decided to do the right thing, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it was scary." He looked directly at Jake. "Thank you, Jake. You gave me my life back." The auditorium erupted in applause. Students stood up. Teachers stood up. It was a standing ovation. After the assembly, Jake was surrounded by students congratulating him, but he made his way through the crowd to Danny. "That was amazing," Jake said. "I can't believe you did that." Danny grinned. "You stood up when I couldn't. Now I can stand up too." That evening, Jake's mom showed him something on her phone. A news article had been published about Lincoln High's transformation. It featured interviews with parents, students, and school board members. The headline read, "How one student's courage sparked a movement for change." But Jake knew it wasn't just about him. It was about Patricia Martinez, who'd fought for her son even when no one listened. It was about Angela Reynolds, who'd turned her family's tragedy into action. It was about the hundreds of parents who'd shown up that morning to say enough is enough. It was about Danny, who'd found the courage to share his story. Change didn't happen because of one person. It happened because one person started something and others decided to join in. Jake saved the article to his phone. Then he texted Danny, "Want to come over this weekend? New game just dropped." The response came back immediately. Definitely. Thanks again for everything." Jake smiled and put his phone down. The story that had started with a lunch tray hitting the cafeteria floor had changed so many lives. But maybe the most important change was the simplest one. A scared, lonely kid now had a friend, and that kid wasn't afraid to go to school anymore. Sometimes that's where changing the world begins, with one person deciding that someone else's pain matters, that it's worth standing up for, that silence isn't an option. Jake had learned something important through all of this. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's seeing something wrong and choosing to act anyway. And when one person does that, really does it, it gives everyone else permission to be brave too. That's how a single moment in a high school cafeteria became a movement. That's how one voice became a chorus. That's how everything changed.